don't know that that's true.
Back here with one, Christopher Canty. Chris, despite having 3 years left on his deal with the Steelers, Antonio Brown has reportedly requested a trade. This stemming from the fallout of skipping practice the final week of the season and subsequently being benched for the final game. Quick history here. Steelers missed the playoffs this season. Brown doubled down on his desire to leave yesterday, tweeting, "Thank you, Steeler Nation, for a big 9 years. Time to move on and forward." Chris, how did we come to this, where we are today with Antonio Brown?
Well, that tweet wasn't passive-aggressive at all, was it?
Not great.
Not even a little bit. No, you know what? I really don't understand how it got to this point, Jenna, and there's a lot of blame to go around. But, I mean, Antonio Brown has the responsibility to his teammates to be a professional. So what he did in Week 17 when they were trying to fight for their playoff lives, that's completely unprofessional. And all I'm saying is you cannot put your teammates in that kind of situation where nobody knows what they can expect of you when we got to go out there in that game. They had to win that game to even have a chance to qualify for the postseason. The fact that you bailed on them, that doesn't reflect well on you. So I think that that's probably at the heart of where we're at right now in terms of the organization having to make a decision about Antonio Brown. Because, listen, if Art Rooney II had it his way, Antonio Brown would be a Pittsburgh Steeler for life. But guess what? Based on what has happened now and the fractured relationship between AB and not only Ben Roethlisberger but his teammates, I think that the organization is put in a tough spot where they have to get rid of the distraction that has been Antonio Brown.
And the fractured relationship between AB and his head coach, Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin has protected him. Some would say has enabled him, but certainly given, I would argue that Antonio Brown's been very lucky, if you will, at how Mike Tomlin's treated him, given him special dispensation. Now, maybe it's working against him at this point, but at any point in their relationship, I would think Antonio Brown would say, man, I love Coach. He lets me do this, he lets me do that. He understands I'm going to produce on Sunday. And for him to then disrespect him to the degree he did, to not only no show, no call, but put Mike Tomlin in a position where he's got to do a press conference saying, I can't get a hold of the guy. He won't return my calls or texts. That's embarrassing, and it undercuts Mike Tomlin at one of the only times in his Pittsburgh tenure when he's really being questioned about his job security, about his future. So I totally understand why the Steelers would feel we almost have to move on, but the almost got removed over the last few weeks with the tweets, with the Instagrams where Antonio has made it clear, I am not interested in a reconciliation, even if you, the Pittsburgh Steelers, are.
Hashtag do what you want to do. Because the question was, how did it get like this? And the reason why it got like this, because Mike Tomlin was not the disciplinarian that he is in the press conference after practices and after games. Because then Mike Tomlin is tough. We see a lot of coaches that are tough like that. They got the mic, man, I'm tough, man, this is my team. But the truth of the matter is, guys are doing what they want to do. And if you want to look, there have been stories coming out receivers in the league because they're going to be in the news. If I can't explain that position, what good am I on TV? So AB, this is not new. I've worked with AB. I know people that work with AB. Yes, he is a tremendous worker. Yes, he is the hardest worker in the building when he gets there because he has been habitually late for years and been able to get away with it. So Mike Tomlin enabling the kid just like parents. Well, which one of my parents got the soft spot? Which one's not going to discipline me because that's the one I'm going to deal with? And that's what's happened to him, and he's become a star doing that. So now, what concessions will they make? Forget about the Facebook video a couple years ago in the locker room. Like, he's put this organization in some bad spots from a PR standpoint. So it's time for him to go. Forget about him requesting a trade. I would have been trading his butt anyway when he didn't show up to work the last week of the season when we're trying to get into the playoffs. So him trying to feel like he's in control, man, if I was Pittsburgh, I'm not trying to send him somewhere favorable. I'm going to send him where I can get the best deal, and potentially if I can happen to send a message
to him
in that, I'm getting ready to do it because I know the Pittsburgh Steelers. I know some of the legendary players. I know players that have played there in Pittsburgh. And there's a reason why Antonio is top 10 in NFL merchandising sold last year, the only wide receiver. It's not just because he's good. It's because the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Pittsburgh Steelers Nation, they support their players and have been doing that for a long time. The organization have supported their players, have camouflaged, because they got some edgy players through the years. The greatest other great players all got a little edge to them coming out of Pittsburgh. So they've protected these players, and they protected AB until it became where we couldn't protect him anymore.
And one of the things the organization has also done throughout the years is they've had continuity more so than any other NFL franchise. If you look at it, their general manager has been there forever. Their head coach is going to be there for a really long time. I know people have said Mike Tomlin is on the hot seat. Mike Tomlin hasn't had a losing season since he took over as the head coach for the Steelers, and he's got a Super Bowl on his resume, and it's a franchise that's had 3 head coaches in the last 50 years. So they've empowered the people at the top of the organization, and CC, to your point, I think this presents an opportunity for the Steelers to take back some control from the players that we've seen the last couple of years. They can set a precedent, a new standard, because they've got to be able to turn the page from the distractions that players have brought up, whether it's Le'Veon Bell or Antonio Brown.
So let's talk about turning the page. For the last however many years, it's always been, okay, coming into the season, they've got the 3 Bs. They're going to be there in the end in some form, one or another. They're going to be in the playoffs, and they are always in contention. The last 2 years, you've had the Steelers at the very end. Now looking ahead, what does this team look like? I mean, can you still look at the Steelers team and say, yeah, no doubt, they'll be there at the end?
Listen, I think they have the 2 most important pieces, which is an elite coach and elite quarterback, but the rest of it's very different. The division is very different. We will see what Baltimore looks like in year 2 of Lamar Jackson, and we will see what Cleveland looks like in year 2 of Baker Mayfield and year 1 of Freddie Kitchens. You also have a team who we know defensively does not have the identity it had a few years ago, that now is going to have to win some games defensively, because I think Juju is a good receiver. I think we are also going to see that Juju is going to see what life is like when you are the team's primary option as opposed to a team's secondary option as far as what the other team, the defense, is trying to do to you. And I liked James Conner. I like his story, and I think he was a good player last year. We saw, though, especially as the year wore on, he's not Le'Veon Bell. And so Big Ben, do we think he's going to get better? Is he going to maintain, or is he going to drop off? They go into next year, to me, assuming they trade Antonio Brown, with more questions than they've had at any point the last 4 or 5 years.
Well, here's what I'll say to that. The fact that they're willing to absorb a $21 million cap charge and move on from AB, that tells you that the organization believes it's going to be addition by subtraction, because by getting rid of all the distractions, the team can focus on the task at hand, which is trying to win football games and compete for a championship. So, yeah, it's not a good thing when your star wide receiver isn't returning the phone calls from the owner, but ultimately I think that the Steelers organization will move past that and focus on trying to take back control in that AFC.
The Steelers for the last 10 years have done a great job, and even beyond that, as far as getting wide receivers and not using high draft capital doing that, and developing them where they became starters. 1, 2, 3. They got 4 or 5 guys up and down NFL roster. Been like, wow, they got Mike Wallace. Oh man, he started over here. Man, my man in Denver. Oh, he started. He started over here. So they have done that. What I like the Pittsburgh Steelers do to change the whole organization back to when they used to win. I know Ben wants to throw the ball, but I want to bring some punch back to the Pittsburgh Steelers. They got a couple good rushers in Watt, in Bud Dupree. Yep. I would put some more people around them, and I'm getting ready. I don't care what they say about the rules. I'm getting ready to start going after the quarterback. They got 2 young quarterbacks, 1 in Baker, 1 in Lamar in Baltimore. Listen, I'm getting ready to put maximum pressure on them. I'm getting ready to lean on James Conner, because the best unit on the Pittsburgh Steelers is their offensive line. We don't talk about them, so I know through Ben and through that offensive line, I'm like baseball, I'm strong up the middle. I believe James Conner over the next 3 years will be a better pro than Juju Schuster, so I'm leaning on him as a running back. I know Ben's going to be good, but I'm going to bring some bite back to that defense, and that's how I bring Pittsburgh Steelers back to relevance, because for me, I've been covering this league a long time. And in every decade, the Pittsburgh Steelers are in the conversation. So it's not getting ready to change with AB leaving and L. Bell leaving. It's the Pittsburgh Steelers. They've been one of the most stable franchises that we've seen in the NFL. But this is a watershed moment for them to take back control of the football team.
Ready for the season to start. It's February. Chris, thanks for joining us. Was that like the
good to see you,
Bulldog?
Oh, man,
coming up to Kyler Murray, end up going #1 overall next year, first things first.